Hi everyone, and welcome to User's Guide for the Soul. We are doing a hybrid class today, so we have some people here in the class at Temple Israel masked, and also some people on Zoom. So forgive us if there's a little bit of interference or figuring out the technical side. So we're learning chapter 46 of the Tanya. It is probably one of the most useful, profound, and accessible meditations that I've encountered in spirituality at all, certainly as well in Jewish meditation. The Alter Rebbe started by telling us that this goal of always doing the right thing, thinking the right thing, saying the right thing, and doing the right thing with full emotion, with love and with reverence, is not just very near to us, but very, very near to us. And if you know the Alter Rebbe and great kabbalistic and Hasidic masters, when you add a second very, you probably need 4 chapters to explain what you mean, and that's what's going to be happening. So the Alter Rebbe started by telling us a story. Imagine, Rick, do you mind closing the door for me? Thanks. Imagine that we had, and we've heard this story in the past few classes, a very, very poor outcast person who was living on a garbage heap, and the royal leader, the king of all the lands, came out of their castle, right to the garbage heap, pulled them out, brought them to the castle into a private chamber, embraced them, kissed them, became friends with them. How much love would the peasant feel? Based on a law that the Alter Rebbe gave us, which is, our hearts reflect each other. If I love you, somewhere in your heart, love will reflect back, and vice versa. If you love me and express it, somewhere in my heart, love will reflect back as well. Based on that law, now this peasant, their heart will be overflowing with love, such that if they have a heart of stone, it will melt and ignite in fiery love. We want that same love to be attached to every one of our mitzvahs that we do at Temple, to every word of Torah that we're learning right now. We want that fiery love, so we're learning how to use this mashal, this story, as a meditation. Then the Alter Rebbe says, now look at how that mashal plays out in the nimshal, in the actual world. We, the people of Israel, were that outcast peasant. We were slaves in the land of Egypt, in the garbage heap of the spiritual world, which is what ancient Egypt was. It was all klipa, all spiritual toxicity, idol worship. We were immersed in that. Our clothes smelled of it, our being smelled of it, and God came personally, not sending an angel, came personally to take us out, and not only take us out, but bring us to Sinai, where God shared the most intimate desires for the world, which is the Torah. The Torah. And if we start to meditate on that and contemplate that and recognize the reality of that, and then we see if a peasant, their heart would ignite with love for a king because they're so different, how much more different, infinitely different, is any human being with the infinite, with God. There's no point of comparison whatsoever. So if the peasant's heart should ignite, our heart even more so should ignite. And we went on, we talked about all the lands, supposedly, quote unquote rather, that God rules, which are the spiritual worlds and the infinite regiments. And all that God is passing over just to come and, as it were, marry us. And the Alter Rebbe went further and said, every time we say Baruch Ata Asher Kidshanu, that formula, it's not just that God's making us holy because we're doing a mitzvah. God is mekadesh. God is marrying us, because kedushin is actually the marriage ceremony. So that phrase, when we say God's making us holy, we're actually saying God's taking us out of the world, uniting with us like a married couple, and elevating us to the level of God's own holiness that's outside the world. And you just have to contemplate on that for 2 minutes or 10 minutes, and you can't help but not feel moved. The reason being, because it doesn't rely on my sensitivity. Many of the other meditations relied on me working on myself and becoming adel, becoming more refined. This, not only does it not matter if I'm not refined, the lower I am, the worse day I'm having, the worse year I'm having, the more coarse I am, the more my heart should explode with love that the ruler of the universe, so to speak, the Ein Sof, is paying attention to little lowly me. And in fact, we're leveraging my coarseness to feel even more emotion. So this is a meditation accessible to everyone. Do people feel that I've summed us up correctly, or did I miss anything important that landed for people? Good, so let's begin. We're on page 713 of Lessons in Tanya. Let's go right from the top. V'lachen chivu Rabbeinu zivracham livracha lakum v'lamod mipnei kol osek b'mitzvah af im hu bur v'am haaretz. Go ahead, Eleanor.
Okay, what page did you say?
713. We'll go right at the top.
703 or 13?
713.
Okay, wait, just give me.
It's like the 613 commandments, but add 100.
Okay, got it. Okay, there.
I gotta laugh. Look, I'm like back with people again. Did you hear that?
Just so we needed 100 more.
There you go.
It starts with therefore.
Yes, please, yeah.
Therefore, the sages of blessed memory made it obligatory to rise and remain standing in the presence of anyone who's engaged in fulfilling a commandment, even if the latter is uncultured and illiterate. When such a person performs a mitzvah, such as bringing Bikurim, the first fruits, to the Beit HaMikdash, one must rise before him.
So we discussed this last week. There is a discussion in the Gemara that when someone's doing a mitzvah, because their soul is united with God, no matter who they are, we have to stand before them. We have to stand before them. And there's an argument whether it's just certain mitzvahs or it's all mitzvahs, but that opinion is expressed that when any Jew does a mitzvah, someone had the opinion that everyone is meant to rise just because their soul is being united with the Ein Sof, and that is holiness right there in the world. And if you remember, we had the whole conversation. What's the power of a mitzvah? The power of a mitzvah is that even though it's here in the physical world, I'm dealing with a gragger, right? And I'm spinning it, I'm making physical sound. That condensed spirituality, that is physical substance, still has no hester. There's no hiding its core of divine intent. So even though it's a tiny, tiny pinhole because it's been contracted and it looks like physicality, I'm looking through that tiny pinhole, I'm seeing right to God's essence. I'm seeing right to God's will, and there's no hiding of God's inner desire, or God's face, as we say. That's why when I do a mitzvah, I get attached to that, and my soul has that same unity as we've been learning. And that's why, in the Gemara, someone thought, someone's doing a mitzvah, everyone has to stand. That's God's holiness right there, right in front of you. There's no hiding it. How could you not stand? It's not standard halacha, but feel free, right? It's a beautiful way to get excited about mitzvahs. Why? V'hayinu mipnei Hashem hashochen mitlabesh b'nafsho b'sha'a zo.
This is because God dwells and clothes himself in this man's soul at such time.
As we've been describing, rak she'ein nafsho margeshet.
It is only that his soul is unconscious of the sanctity that resides within him at the time of his performance.
Now, there's two things. There's the reality that when we do a mitzvah or learn Torah, that we're completely united with God, like a married couple is united on their wedding day. The Alter Rebbe is saying that's the reality. Then there's what I'm aware of. How much of that reality I'm aware of, and does it matter? And it may be that physical, coarse, self-centered me is not in the slightest aware of the beauty and the reverence that I should be experiencing, that I'm being united with holiness that can't even connect with the world. It's so far beyond anything. I'm just clueless, but it's still happening. So it's like if you had a cat that was walking around at the Louvre and it walked by the Mona Lisa, and the cat is just looking at the Mona Lisa, and a cat is not appreciative of human art. It doesn't look at it and think, oh, I should stop and stare at this painting. It doesn't recognize the genius in it. The cat has no appreciation of it. It's just looking around. Can it find a mouse or some food or a nice sunbeam to take a nap in? That's all a cat's aware of. It doesn't change that is the Mona Lisa. It's still a cat walking by a great masterpiece. And that's many of us. That's what I am when I wash my hands and said a blessing this morning, I'm like, okay, try and get some kavanah, try and have some feeling, okay, I'm connecting to God, great. Who am I kidding? I'm washing my hands in the sink, I'm drying it with a towel. That's my experience, right? I'm like that cat walking by the Mona Lisa. Every time I do a mitzvah, I'm like, I don't have the sensitivity to appreciate it. And so I do mitzvahs and I'm not aware of this union. Fine. But it doesn't change the reality that that's what's happening. Hold on. Noreen's gonna ask a question. This is a very exciting time. Noreen, I'm gonna mute myself so there's not feedback.
Okay, so I'm wondering about the temporaneous quality of this, that you turn off and turn on a mitzvah. I mean, when I'm doing the mitzvah, I'm united with God, I'm married to God, and then I'm done with the mitzvah. What happens? I'm turned off from that connection.
Oh, first of all, I want to congratulate ourselves. Did that happen? Okay, so that just so you know, people that are not here, right now, this is our first hybrid experience. Noreen is in the room with me, but people were saying they didn't like not seeing her amazing face and hearing her questions, etc. So we set up her on Zoom, but we had to work out the muting and unmuting, so that is the very first time. If you could tell, I'm a little excited. I hope it has a future. And the question was so profound, right? So the question is, okay, what happens with time? Here I am, I've elevated myself to be one with holiness, with a mitzvah. That's obviously outside of time, right? God's holiness is before time is created. As we'll learn, this is even above Atzilus. And then I just turn it off. I stop doing the mitzvah. Now the holiness is gone. Like, how does that compute? The truth is, there's two perspectives. There's my perspective as a created being inside time, where yes, now I'm connected to holiness and now I'm not, and my free will turns it on or turns it off, as crazy as that sounds. Then there's how my soul exists above created universe, above time, and for that, every mitzvah is eternal, and unfortunately, every avera is also eternal, and we got to work on that, right? So you can't fit that into your physical brain. You're right, it's a paradox. Like, it doesn't make sense that I could just channel infinite light and meaning and then just stop that channel as if it has anything to do with time. And in other places in the Tanya, I can't quote it now, the Alter Rebbe says, yes, anytime you do a mitzvah, that actually on a soul level, up in Atzilus and above, that's actually eternal. It doesn't stop. The effects are there outside of time, which means it affects all time, which means it's eternal, right? And that's really what heaven is. Heaven is the light that comes from our Torah and mitzvahs, which is shining eternally. It doesn't stop ever. We're just in time now, so we lose contact with it. I say that, I don't understand it either, rest assured. Like, that's like crazy talk, right? But that's how you try to express it from here inside time. Oh, hold on, they can't hear you, so hold on, I will mute.
Michael, you mentioned that every time you do a mitzvah, you're like the cat in the Mona Lisa. I kind of find that hard to believe, that yes, washing your hands, you may not feel like that's a mitzvah, but when you're eating matzah on Passover, you are feeling more connected.
Okay, you're muted? Yeah, I'm good. Okay, these are excellent questions. That's a great question. I mean, there are levels of mitzvahs, and some of them I really feel. And by the way, there's levels of people. And so at Tzaddik, don't they feel the real thing? The Alter Rebbe will address that at the end of this chapter. So you're thinking, you got your Tanya questions. We'll get to it today, I believe. Believe Neder. Ah, we're laughing into class. I love it. Stay tuned. So that's it. And why is our soul unconscious? Mipnei masach hachomer hagufani shelo nizdakech umachashich einei hanefesh marot Elokim.
Because of the barrier of the bodily grossness within which the soul dwells, which is of yet not been refined, and which dims the eyes of the soul, preventing it from seeing divine visions.
So we understand this on a basic level, right? You know, a kid that's at a birthday party and they see the cake And that's just all they want. Mom, when do we get the cake? When do we get the cake? Oh, I want the cake. It's so good. And that's all they can think about because they're childish. They haven't matured. And you sit them down and you say, you know what? You're missing the real meaning here. The meaning is not the cake. The meaning is your friend has a special day. We want to smile at them and pay attention to them, make them feel good, sing happy birthday. That's the real meaning of this moment. The cake is there to help with that meaning, but the cake is not the point. And if a young child doesn't learn to stop focusing on the cake, now their friendships are not going to be as deep, right? As parents, we want to teach them to focus on the deeper things. But the same applies to us, right? We keep growing throughout life. And although, as Rick said, at the Seder, when I'm eating my matzah, I'm thinking about self-nullification. It's an important moment. Okay, there maybe my heart is full of love and reverence. But is there an end to the amount of love and reverence I could feel? Is there a limit to the amount of meaning that I can perceive in life? No. So wherever I am, as we'll learn, there's always more. And it's the same phenomenon. Just like a child is seeing the cake, and that's causing them to not see the deeper meaning in the moment, me, just subtly, by experiencing myself as primarily a physical phenomenon, as primarily a body, which, I stub my toe, it's my body that hurts. That's me, right? Isn't it? Right? I'm hungry, and it's me that's hungry. My senses are always telling me that's who you are, Smolash. You're that physical body. And the more I identify with that, even in a very subtle way, the less I'm able to appreciate the depth of my relationship with the Ein Sof. And there's no end to that depth, as we said. So that's the barrier. The fact that the soul is having to navigate life through a body just automatically limits the soul's own senses and causes us to have to work to appreciate the subtle. Does that make sense? On the other hand, כמו האבות וכיוצא בהן שראו עולמם בחייהם.
As experienced by the patriarchs and others of their stature, who saw their world, the spiritual world to come during their lifetime.
All right, so perhaps an exception is Abraham and Sarah, Isaac. These great, we call them Merkava, we call them a chariot, that they're just completely always channeling divine light and always aware of that channeling and always full of love and awe. That was them 100% all the time. And so what did that mean? It meant that they saw the world to come in their lifetime. It's a strange thing. It doesn't mean that they could, they probably could, but we're not saying they could look through the curtain of physicality and see into the spiritual. They could. But what is the world to come? The world to come, we have a misconception sometimes that the world to come, the reward for doing Torah mitzvahs, is something that God gives us like a disconnected reward, right? Oh, Smolash, you passed the test, you did good things, you learned Torah, you did mitzvahs. Now God's, putting together a world to come for you that's full of divine light, and here you go. It's a present from God for having done so good. That's actually a mistake, because the world to come is not some reward from God that's disconnected. The world to come is the direct result and the inner reality of the Torah and mitzvahs that I'm doing right now. So as we're learning right now, we may not be conscious of the divine unity that's happening, but that divine unity that, as we said, is happening outside of time, that's now in the highest worlds. And when I'm back out of my body, boom, now I'm suddenly aware, of the result of the Torah that we are learning right now. And that is Olam Haba. It's not a separate reward that God gives. It's just the result of having done spiritual work here in the physical world. It's the light that comes out of it. It's the light that comes out of it. So it's not that, when someone says, oh, someone didn't do enough in our history and they're judged and, they don't have a high place in heaven. It's not that God is going, you failed me. It's that you emerge out of the physical body and you look around and it's just, oh, I missed out on creating all this light and the light wasn't done, so it's not there. That's all. It's not a punishment. It's just the consequence of not having fulfilled what I came here for. Whereas the patriarchs, when it says they saw the world to come in their lifetime, what it means is what I can't do, I can't put $1 in a pushka and see the tremendous unity and divine light that's happening. I'm not sensitive to it. I'm that cat walking by the Mona Lisa. They were fully aware. They did a mitzvah with full appreciation and emotional connection to the incredible miracle that was happening. And for them, it was real. And so that the joy, the inner meaning, the light that was there in the mitzvah that all of us perhaps, or many of us, just skip over, they saw it right there in their lifetime. They saw their olam haba. They saw the world to come right in their lifetime. Does that make sense?
I have a question.
Yes, Sue Ellen.
Cantor, so if someone doesn't do mitzvahs and they don't study Torah and they die and their soul goes wherever souls go, is it dark? Is that what you're saying, that there is darkness because they haven't reached the light in the world to come?
Okay, we're having a conversation about the nature of a mitzvah and how amazing it is, and in that context, I'm comfortable saying if I do less mitzvahs or miss it out, now there's less world to come for me. So I'm comfortable with that. There's not anybody that's ever lived that hasn't done Torah, hasn't done mitzvahs or learned Torah, right? The mitzvah of loving another Jew, the mitzvah of taking care of your physical body, the mitzvah of feeding your family. Like, everyone is full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate. So in the context of, is there anyone that's ever lived that in their lifetime has not created spiritual light that exists in the world to come? That's, I personally doubt that could ever happen. Everybody is here for a reason. Everybody does amazing things. And also, it's not my place, unless someone specifically comes to you as a student or a child, it's not our place to look at someone else and say, oh, because I don't know what their test is. I don't know what kind of a Yetzer Hara they've been given. They could be passing their test with flying colors. And I might have been born with a very timid Yetzer Hara and given all the resources to do amazing things, and I might be getting a 30% on my score, right? So we have no way of knowing with each other. So only in the context of talking about the beauty of a mitzvah am I comfortable saying, if I miss on it, now there's less light in the world to come.
That was my question. Thank you.
Is that fair? Am I being fair?
Yes. Yeah.
I have a question.
You probably didn't hear that, but Rick said that was a cop-out. But, it was a loving cop-out and an appropriate one. Yes, Eleanor.
I believe that the more light that we can bring to the world that we're in, the faster the Messiah will come.
That is the Jewish belief. That is one of the 13 principles of faith that Maimonides says every Jew believes in. That is something that Reformed Judaism embraces, not as a figure of the Messiah, but as a messianic period. And fine, right? I mean, there's arguments about what Messiah means. Is it everybody's arguing? So we have our voice too. We say it's an era, and maybe all of us collectively are the messianic figure. Like, that's all beyond my pay grade. But 100%, that is every mainstream faction or denomination of Judaism believes that exactly, that the more good we do, the faster we bring this messianic period or messianic figure, whatever that tipping point looks like. We can't imagine what the miracle of the world will be when spirituality is the main reality and physicality is this subtle afterthought. So yeah, you and I have to work on that.
That's what you said about the Tanya books.
And I forgot to read from the Tanya today. Exactly. So the comment was, that's what I said about the Tanya, that God willing, in the merit of our printing a Tanya here at Temple Israel, maybe the Messianic period will come this afternoon. Why not? We laugh with joy. God willing. All right, let's go on. These are okay. Well, let's do the mute thing.
So I'm thinking, after the Akedah, when Isaac comes down the mountain, when he's on the mountain and he says, now there's vision. Maybe that's what that means about seeing the value of the mitzvah and feeling the light of the mitzvah. Same thing with Jacob, when he leaves after wrestling the angel, maybe that's why he can leave and go face Esau, because he's got that power. He saw the light. I wonder if that isn't, what that means in the Torah.
Yeah, let's mute again. So absolutely, beautiful comment. No question that Abraham's being tested was part of his fully becoming Merkavah and part of his pulling down a divine soul for each of us, and that's what gives us this capacity to unite with God. Abraham had to work for it and be tested for it. We have it as a gift. It's automatic, even if we're not conscious of it. Beautiful. Because, come on, and then we're on, we're turning a page, 714. V'zeu shamar Asaf, beruach HaKodesh, be'ad kol Knesset Yisrael sheba gola. Go ahead, Doreen.
This is also the meaning of what Asaph said under divine inspiration on behalf of the whole community of Israel who were later to be in exile.
All right, so Asaph you may recognize as one of the writers of Psalms, right? And he said on behalf of the whole community of Israel, and so this is Psalm 73. This is not Asaph talking about himself, because he was at a very high level and very spiritual, very, very sensitive. But what did he say? He said it on behalf of, by the way, of us. He says, of the whole community of Israel who were later in exile. So when he wrote this in Psalms, he wasn't talking about himself in the temple, having such divine inspiration, seeing divinity in the world. He was talking about Smolash, however many thousand years later, out in exile, coarse, unsensitive to spirituality. And on our behalf, he said, Vani var veloida behemot hayiti imach, vani tamid imach.
And I am foolish and know not. I was a beast before you, yet I am continually with you.
Beautiful. And Rick, let's let you go next, so we'll be prepared to do our. So what did he say? He said, Ani var, right? I am a boor. I'm foolish. I know nothing. I'm like a beast in front of you. I'm like a beast in front. So who just unmuted?
I did. You told me. You told me to.
In a second. We're working on it. I give false triggers there. So I'm foolish. I know not. I'm like a beast before you. So I'm that cat that's walking by the Mona Lisa, right? I'm that ant that's walking by the Taj Mahal, right? Not aware that there's this wonder of the world right there. Yet I'm continually with you. Here's the contradiction. Even though I'm a beast, even though I know nothing about this, I have no appreciation, yet I'm continually with you. That doesn't change the reality that when I do a mitzvah, we're married. Me and God are outside of the cosmos, outside of time, united like a married couple, even though I'm like a beast before God. In fact, almost because I'm a beast. There's a lot of Hasidus written on that, but I don't want to go down that route right now. And what is Kalamar she'af al pi shani kebehema b'hioti imcha velo eda velo argish benafshi yichud zeh. So Rick, go ahead, I will mute.
This means that even though I am a beast, when I am with you, my soul, being unaware of and insensitive to this union achieved between my soul and God through performing a mitzvah, where I to believe, to be aware and sensitive, my soul would be affected by a manner.
And makes sense. Even though I'm a beast, that I'm totally unaware, that's still happening. And notice the word that he used on the bottom of 714, Vani va velo eda. This is what Asaph said. I'm a boor, and I don't know. What does not knowing mean? Now that we've learned the Kabbalah, what is dat? That word that he used, eda, is the conjugation of dat. Witness also. But dat in Kabbalah means the way my intellect connects to an idea, an abstract idea, to create emotions. So it's really connection to abstract information that contains within that connection the capacity for the depth of emotion. That's what dat is, right? We're specific in Kabbalah, right? These words in Hebrew mean something very, very technical and very dynamic. So what we're saying is, I'm doing a mitzvah, I'm like a beast that doesn't know, it means my dat is not flowing. I'm doing this mitzvah and I can't connect to that idea of this abstract holiness that's in the world, and I can't feel the emotional reality of what that is. Otherwise, I'd be dancing and singing every time I did a mitzvah. Every time I had a chance to love another Jew, I'd just be having a party because I'm so excited, right? Instead, it's like, oh, someone needs me to go and help with a flat tire or help with, I have to do it. It's the right thing. I work myself up. Okay, I did a mitzvah. I feel good in a quiet, satisfied way. But, am I elated like I won $1 billion? No, right? There my emotions are attached. So easy to attach emotions to the physical. The work is to learn to attach emotions to the abstract, to the spiritual. There's a story that's told about this phenomenon, right? The phenomenon is we do a mitzvah or learn Torah, we create this union, this light that is outside of time and space, that's unbelievable, and yet we're not aware. But our lack of awareness doesn't change the value of what we've done. Doesn't change the value. So there's a story, it's really a mashal, it's not something that happened. There were a fable. There were a group of very, very learned, wise people that knew all about spirituality, spent their whole life studying, were very sensitive to it, and they were all going to a convention where they were studying the phenomenon of malachim, of angels, the phenomenon of angels. So they all reviewed what they knew about angels and the different orders and levels, and tried to meditate and connect with angels. Maybe some of them did, and they're all coming together to really work on this and appreciate what was happening in the spiritual worlds. And so a bunch of them get on a wagon, and they're going to this convention. And also in the wagon is the wagon driver. So as they're going, they're talking about this angel and that angel, and this tzaddik is going to show us the meaning of this fine detail and point. And the wagon driver's listening, and it's not something he cares about or knows about, right? To the wagon driver, this is a trip. The reason for the trip is not to learn about malachim. The reason of the trip is because at the end of the trip, he's going to get a few rubles, and then he can pay a debt, he can go into the pub, he can get some mashka, some vodka. And so the reason of the trip for the wagon driver is, the mashka. I'm driving to get rubles, to get mashka, to get vodka. That's the reason. Also on the wagon are the horses, right? And if you go into the mind of one of the horse is listening to the human beings chattering, and the horse is not thinking about getting paid rubles and what they can buy. The horse is thinking, you know what? I'm kind of hungry. I could use some hay to eat. And when I get to that destination, they're going to take some nice hay, put it in front of me, I'm going to eat it. So the reason we're going on this trip and doing all this traveling is to get some hay, right? So it's all happening at the same time. You got these great wise people that are going to understand divine, spiritual, angelic concepts. You got the wagon driver that's doing this for perhaps vodka, and you got the horse that's doing this for hay. And then the anecdote finishes in Yiddish is weil die Pferd tracht in Hober seinen die Malachim kein Malachim nicht. Just because the horse is thinking about hay, so does that mean the angels aren't angels? And you can't really translate the inflection from the Yiddish, right? It's a story that actually the last Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, told many, many times. So it's about this. Yeah, the horse is thinking about hay. And yeah, I don't get, when I do a mitzvah, one inkling of the true meaning of it. But just because the horse is thinking about hay doesn't mean angels aren't angels, right? That reality is still there. The convention's still happening. And just because Smolash doesn't appreciate what's happening when a bar mitzvah is chanting Torah this Shabbat, doesn't mean that they're not getting married to God. Doesn't mean that unity is not happening. Good story. Good. שתיפול עליה אימתה ופחד תחילה ואחר כך אהבה רבה בתענוגים או כריש באש. Here, let me mute.
Which should bring down upon it fear and awe first, followed by a great and pleasurable love that experiences delights, a love wherein the soul delights in godliness, or a love like fiery flames of ardent longing for godliness.
So that's what should happen. Every time I do a mitzvah, I should have first a sense of awe. I'm standing in front of the Creator who's paying attention to me. I'm trembling with the meaning of this. And then a great love that God is paying attention to me, takes me out of Egypt, takes my people out of Egypt and marries us and now unites with us. And as we learned in this meditation, now that I recognize that amount of love that's being directed towards me from the infinite, now my heart automatically will reflect that. And I can appreciate that and expand that. And this is the meditation that, for everyone, is very, very accessible to say the Shema with a full heart of love and reverence, and to do mitzvahs with love and reverence to be able to elevate them. Kimidat hatzadikim shenizdakech chumram. Yes. No. Paula, if you would unmute. I got you reading last. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. So Paula, you'll go next if you're ready. No, you go ahead, Noreen.
Like the quality of the tzaddikim whose corporality has been refined.
Exactly. So now, hold on. And you'll need to mute again. I got it. So like the tzaddikim whose corporality has been refined. So in fact, if I do this meditation, even though I'm still a beast before God, I'll have edged myself a little closer, and I'll be more sensitive to spiritual emotions, and I'll do my Torah and mitzvahs with more emotions, closer to the quality of a tzaddik, which is the whole point of this book, right? Is like, once we're a Beinoni, if you've been learning with us, now bringing my insides to match my outsides, right? Bringing my soul emotions closer to my behavioral perfection, because I'm just controlling myself with my mind. I want to now work, and this is a beautiful meditation to become more like a tzaddik if I'm reaching the level of a Beinoni, God willing. וכנודע שדעת הוא לשון הרגשה בנפש, והוא כולל חסד גבורה. Go ahead, Paula.
Is my thing working? Yes. For as is known, the term dat connotes a sensitivity of the soul, and this is comprised of chesed and gevura.
So that's what it's about. Dat, when we say, oh, I don't know you, and we think in America about the word know, and we think, I don't have the information. That's not at all what dat is. Not that I don't have the information in my mind. It's that I don't have the soul sensitivity to turn that information, to connect to it such that I have emotions. That's what dat is. It's said about the Tzemach Tzedek, which is another of the Chabad Rebbes, that at the end of Nila on Yom Kippur, when everybody else had finished their fast and they're like, okay, I did it all now let me sit down and break my fast, and what a pleasure that is, right? We all know that feeling. What did he do? First thing, he ran to his room and opened up a Gemara and started learning. Why? Because he didn't miss eating. He just didn't have time on Yom Kippur to learn, and he just had such sensitivity for it. It didn't even occur to him that the first thing he should do is break the fast. He just wanted to, his biggest pleasure was to learn Gemara. So, boom, end of Nila. When he's done, he runs and he opens the Gemara and, now I can learn Torah again. What a pleasure to be united with God. So we're not going to, very unlikely we'll get to that level of sensitivity, but that's dat. That's truly being aware of what the deepest meaning is in our tradition. So much so that even after fasting for 27 hours, he's still, the first thing he wanted, his biggest pleasure was learning. Right? So the darkness of my body doesn't impact the reality of my unity with Hashem. That really is what this is about, right? A soul being in a body we don't see properly, but that doesn't affect my unity. Still, that unity is happening. אף על פי כן אני תמיד עמך כי אין החומר מונע ייחוד הנפש באור אינסוף ברוך הוא וממלא כל עלמין. Back to Eleanor, I believe.
Nevertheless, I am continually with you, for the corporality of the body does not prevent the union of the soul with the light of the blessed Ein Sof, who fills all worlds.
Right, so okay, I'm not sensitive, I'm not Moshe, I'm not Sarah, I'm not sensitive to this, but still, even though I'm a beast, I'm always with you. The moment I do a mitzvah, that unity happens whether I know it or not. וכמו שכתוב, גם חושך לא ישכיח ממך.
As it is written, even darkness cannot obscure you.
Makes sense. ובזה יובן חומר עונש איסור מלאכה בשבתות וחמץ בפסח השווה לכל נפש. Go ahead, Susan. Are you got the page? Top of 7 bottom of 716 through 717. Accordingly.
Is this one will be able?
No, before that. So bottom of 716, uvazeh, accordingly, and then through to applies
Accordingly,
to.
since as above, every Jew who performs a mitzvah is granted the unity and sanctity of supreme holiness, even when he does not perceive it, as does a tzaddik.
And go on, one will.
One will be able to understand the severity of the punishment for transgressing the prohibition of work on Shabbat, or that of leavened bread on Passover, which equally applies to all.
So this explains why if we break something or do something or fail something, let ourselves down, there's not different levels of punishment. I mean, shouldn't there be? Isn't it obvious? If it's tzaddik who's so sensitive that they see everything that's happening, they recognize the unity that's happening. We brought up matzah on Pesach, right? If they sit there and leave the matzah uneaten on a Seder, should they really only get the same punishment that I do? For me, it's a cracker, right? I mean, he said, so I didn't eat it. I know I'm supposed to eat it. It's abstract. I get there's meaning to it. I appreciate it a little, but I mean, give me a break. Is it that big a surprise if someone like me forgets or runs out or whatever, and not matzah, but some other mitzvah, whatever, or some negative? I tell a story. I gossip. Should I really have the same punishment as somebody who is given such a sensitive soul that they can see right through and they see the incredible meaning in it? How could they possibly go wrong? Isn't that a much worse thing? No, says the Alter Rebbe. In fact, it's the exact same consequence for everybody, because in truth, I'm no less connected to the Ein Sof than the greatest tzaddik, because that unity happens in my soul whether I know it or not. That's why it's actually the exact same punishment. It's the same, we call it karet, right? We don't go into what exactly that is. But the punishment is identical across the board, no matter how refined or coarse a person is, exactly because of this phenomenon. Make sense?
And it's the same across the board no matter which mitzvah it is?
Again?
It's the same across the board no matter which mitzvah it is?
It's the same across the board no matter what mitzvah it is. Correct. Any consequence that's mentioned in the Torah that says, if you fail to do this, or if you do this negative thing, then this is the consequence. You should be given stripes or whatever. I mean, there's certain things where, depending on if you're a Kohen, there's details, but generally, any mitzvah consequence, it's not. They don't say, well, if it's if it's this level of soul, then you give them a bigger punishment. If this level of soul, you give them a lower. We have one Torah, and it applies to every Jewish person.
Wearing linen and wool is equal to eating a bacon cheeseburger.
Well, I'm not saying that there aren't bigger consequences for some mitzvahs. I'm saying that if I put on linen and wool, and a greatest Torah scholar puts on linen and wool, the same consequence applies to both of us. Right. But murdering someone is a bigger issue than. Or you'll have to unmute. I want you to unmute.
So what about the discussion in the Torah that if the closer you are to God, the more God expects from you, like Nadav and Abihu, that the punishment will be more severe?
Mute again. Yeah, so this is talking about the laws that are in the Torah and the consequences. For everything like that, there's going to be exceptions. And obviously, we're not talking about God's emotional... God's emotional dearness to great tzaddikim in the Torah is, I wouldn't compare that. God loves everything equally, It's hard. We're hitting several paradoxes at the same time, right? But when I say it's the same consequence for everybody, I'm talking about just standard mitzvahs as they're discussed in halakha. I'm not talking about, two tzaddikim that decided they wanted to be so close to God, they didn't care about preserving their lives and ran and gave an offering that was unauthorized, like. That's just a very rare occurrence that was there to teach us something. Yeah, but generally in halakha, it is the case that any consequence applies to sensitive souls and insensitive souls equally. Going on, for even lefi she'af benefesh bur v'am haaretz gamor meir or krushat Shabbat v'yom tov v'nidon benafsho b'charet uskila al chilul krushat so. Go ahead, Linda.
For even in the soul of an uncultured and completely illiterate person shines the light of the sanctity of Shabbat or festival. Hence, he faces capital punishment by karet for eating leavened bread on Passover and stoning for doing a prohibited form of labor on Shabbat, for the profanation of the sanctity which illuminates his soul.
All right, so I break Shabbat and a tzaddik breaks Shabbat, right? I can understand how I break Shabbat. To me, it's another day, right? If a tzaddik breaks Shabbat, how could they do this? There's another story about the Ruzhiner Rebbe, that there's a conversation in the Gemara that if you're traveling in the desert and you lose track of what day it is, how do you deal with Shabbat? And so there's different opinions. You count 6 days at that point and then celebrate Shabbat, or you do Shabbat in the 6 days, whatever it is. It's discussed. And the Ruzhiner Rebbe was learning this as a young boy, and he couldn't understand the question. He said, this doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. How is it possible for someone to not know that it's Shabbat? I mean, the sky is different, the trees are different, the people are different, the air is different. Like, how could someone think that it's not Shabbat when it is? The whole world is different. It's so holy. Like, that's such a nonsensical question. And so the Ruzhiner, even as a child, was so sensitive to holiness that he couldn't understand how someone could miss it. He couldn't understand how someone could miss the beauty of the day, right? And how is it possible that he could break Shabbat? Shouldn't that be the most unheard of thing, or shouldn't there be a different punishment for him? No, because in fact, even though I'm not aware of it like the Ruzhiner Rebbe, me and you, we all have the same union, the same light that happens in our soul. It's exactly the same value, so that's why it's the same punishment. And we're making the point just to show us how important each of our mitzvahs is. It's not a halakhic discussion here. Ki Torat achat lechulanu. Oh, sorry. Top of the page is 718. V'gam mashu chametz o tiltul mukse pogem ba kedusha she'al nafsho kmo bi kedushat nefesh tzaddik ki Torah achat lechulanu. Doreen, go ahead, right down to we all have one Torah. Top of 718. You'll want to unmute. Yeah, there you go. Good.
I'm sorry, whereabouts?
Top of 718.
Okay. This intimates that before him, even Da'at alone, supernal knowledge, which comprises chesed and gevurah, is like Bais and a physical creation. That is the physical world of Asiya, not its spiritual counterpart, when compared with the light of the Ein Sof.
You had don't unmute. You had a ton of crazy Hebrew, and Mazel Tov. You actually pronounced that so beautifully. But we're on the other side of the page, 718. So do for me similarly.
Similarly, the transgression involving the slightest amount of leaven on Passover, or the moving of the
muktzah
on Shabbat, blemishes the sanctity which rests on the uncultured person's soul, just as it would the sanctity of the soul of a tzaddik.
For we all have one Torah. It's the same for all of us. So we'll pick up here at 718. Let's do a quick meditation. So the Alter Rebbe is raising here that not only something from the Torah, right, breaking the sanctity of Shabbat, which is karet, not only that is the same for all of us, but even just a rabbinical decree, which is, something having to do with leaven, or even muksa means something you're not allowed to use on Shabbat, but you can touch it, right? The Torah doesn't say, it says don't light a fire, and please don't quote me halakhically, but according to the Torah, it doesn't mean that I can't touch a match. I just can't take the match and light a fire, right? So the rabbi said, well, we don't want to have people touching matches because you know what happens, then they might decide, oh, this is a good idea, let me light a fire. So that's muksa, and you shouldn't even touch it. You shouldn't move it, etc., but that's rabbinic, not biblical. So the Alter Rebbe is pointing out now, not just biblical, but also rabbinic has equal effect on our soul and is equally important. So we'll pick up 718, Umash Katuv. Let's find ourselves in a comfortable position. Thanks to everyone for navigating the technology. I think we did great. does this feel like, I'll ask later. Let's put our feet in a comfortable position. So we just got a lot of information, and here's where we incorporate that into my soul emotions through our meditation, through the really through the long short path that we're using. So let's open up our breath, let it deepen. A beautiful way for the stress to leave your system is just to breathe deeply. Just that in itself is such a delicious pleasure. Start counting for each stage of the breath. So we'll have 4 counts to breathe in, 4 for the breath to remain in my lungs and belly, 4 to expel it through my nose, if I'm comfortable, through my nostrils, and 4 to stay empty. So start with me breathing in on 1, 2, 3, 4. Stay nice and full. 2, 3, 4. Breathing back out. 2, 3, 4. Nice and empty. 2, 3. Start again. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep it in. 2, 3, 4. Back out. 2, 3, 4. Staying empty. 2. Keep that cycle. We'll keep our cycles 4 counts for each stage. We're going to open up our wisdom gateway. That is the space between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. Sort of an open, empty gap. We'll open that wisdom gateway up, the space between the end of the in-breath and beginning of the out-breath. And in that wisdom gateway, let's place this meditation. And that a heart reflects love like a face in water. Like a face in water automatically. And just let all the details of this meditation, that God came to us as if we were sitting on a garbage heap and pulled us right into God's chambers with embraces. In any aspect of the details of the meditation, let it fill your mind. So the mind does not need to remain empty in Jewish meditation. It should be filled to the brim with more and more details of this meditation. And if you're seeing it on a small screen, blow the screen to a much larger size, 3 or 4 times the size. If you're seeing gray or black and white, add color. If you're watching it from outside, put yourself in it. Let it continue to fill your mind. Yeah. The love that God has shown us and the reflecting love from my heart. And as it fills your mind, notice any new emotions. Maybe they were always there and you just never noticed them. And you're just tracking them now. They may be more subtle, although powerful. And let that circuit strengthen and grow. You know, the meditation, the intellect and the meditation lead to the emotion. If you're following this class in the future, feel free to open your eyes for a moment and pause your screen, and I invite you to stay in this meditation for any length of time, 5, 10, 20 minutes. If you're with us in the class, we'll just take 30 more seconds. Wiggle your toes and fingers. Open your eyes. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here at User's Guide for the Soul, where we're a good way through this stunning, world-changing text. So if you'd like to join on Zoom, in person, however, please email Maya at temple-israel.org. We'd love to send you the link and have you as part of our class. Otherwise, Yasher Koach, have a beautiful week. We'll see you next time.